My wife and I are boomers, but tech-savvy ones, so we came here for perspective. We have 3 children. The first two, 27 and 24, are both very responsible. Our youngest son, 21, though we love him, is troubled. My wife and I both work well-paying jobs, so we are comfortable if not exorbitantly wealthy. We are smart with our money and invest it well, and have tried to teach our kids to do the same. The oldest 2 understand this and are both financially stable. Our youngest is finishing college, and we have financially supported him so far. As with our other 2, we established a small spending allowance with restrictions on how much he could spend. He has chafed under this restriction in a way that his siblings never did. He frequently uses his money on partying and boys' weekends, and is constantly asking for more. He feels that it is unfair that we should restrict his spending when we are as well off as we are. At least 3 times we have tried to sit down with him to help him make a budget and manage his money better, but he has ignored our advice every time. When we suggested that he get a part-time job if he wanted to spend more, he was very angry with us and accused us of being stingy and cruel. A crisis point happened last November when he stole one of my credit cards and used it to buy huge amounts of alcohol for a house party. When we confronted him about it, he claimed to have gotten it mixed up with his debit card. His card is red, mine is blue. We saw through this and decided to cut off the money we were giving him. We explained to him that we would pay his tuition fees and rent as we had been doing, but that any other money he wanted to spend he would have to earn. He was furious with us and hung up on us in a rage. He barely spoke to us after that. Christmas was tense until earlier this week. He came to us and confessed. After the incident, we went to the bank to remove our names from his account. We are unsure why. While there, the bank suggested that he apply for a credit card as a way to build his credit. He did so, and in the past 3 months managed to rack up almost $9,000 in debt, with no way of paying it off. He told us he had just planned to get a job and pay it off later. He said he had learned his lesson and asked us to pay the debt for him. I am dead set against paying it. I understand fully that this will plunge him into debt before he even graduates. But I think he needs to learn how to be an adult, and I am tired of cleaning up after him. Furthermore, taking on $9,000 in debt would hurt our finances as well. My wife thinks that we should pay the bill with the expectation that he will pay us back with a less extortionist interest rate. She feels that this would teach him his lesson without crippling him. But I just don't know if he would follow through with it. So would I be the a-hole for not paying the bill and leaving him to fend for himself against his debt? OP, clearly your son has not learned his lesson, or he would be asking you to give him that budget lecture again and interview or resume tips so he can start paying off his debt that he racked up on his own. You're already paying his tuition, his rent, and I'm sure he's not going hungry, so no, you guys are not a-holes. He's faring quite a bit better than so many graduates. You would be the a-hole if you enabled him by paying this off for him though. At most, help him research whether he can transfer the debt to something else with a lower interest rate. Now for some comments. Definitely not the a-hole, and I wouldn't even offer that deal. $9,000 is a lot of debt, but most of his major expenses are covered by his parents even now. And unless I missed it, it's not seeming like his parents expect to be paid back for those things. He could get a job and most of his paycheck would pretty much just be for discretionary spending anyhow. I'm assuming he at least pays utilities or like car insurance, though maybe his parents cover that too. All he has to do is live a slightly boring life for like a year. Plenty of kids leave school with more than $9,000 in debt. Time for him to get a job. It's later and time to pay it off. If your wife insists on helping, I would advise against taking on the full $9,000 and letting him pay you back, because it will not happen. But it might not be too aimless to offer to match his monthly payment to pay it down faster, at which point he starts paying you back the other half. You're taking on $4,500 in risk, and I truly think you would be fine outright refusing. But it's something, you know, not the a-hole. In addition, if this task isn't finished, definitely remove your names from your son's bank accounts. Keep an eye on your credit reports and secure your SSNs. Consider this plain defense. He was chafing about you telling him how to spend his money, should have stayed out of that, yet also not given him more. Do not loan him money. Your wife is wrong. My parents did this with my sister. 30 years later, she still owes them. When dad would occasionally put his foot down and say enough, mom would help behind his back. Can you say enabler? Story 2. I'm a 47-year-old man. Me and my family, wife and kids have had the same neighbors for the past 11 years. In our old flat, we were neighbors and they moved away. We then moved to the house right beside them. This is all to show that we are close to our neighbors and we pretty much see them as a family friend rather than just simply a next-door neighbor, as we've been so close for over a decade, which is why I feel bad for doing what I did. A few years ago, our neighbors had to borrow some money from us so they could afford to go on holiday. £400. The holiday itself wasn't 400, but they needed the extra cash on top of what they could afford to go on a holiday that they considered was worth. Anyways, to this day, they still haven't paid a single penny back. However, what they were doing was providing us with a huge plate of food. For example, meat plus chips, a couple of times a week. Me and my wife had no idea why they were doing so at the time, so we just accepted it and moved on with our lives. This has been happening every week for the past 2 or 3 years. Our neighbors were chefs, so the food they were giving us was glorious and were always filled with unique flavors. However, just yesterday, when our neighbor's wife showed up this afternoon with another plate of food, she said the lines of, "I'm so glad we finally managed to pay our final ounce of debt we owe you." Confused, I just said, "Really? Did you relay the money to our bank account?" She looked at me weird and said, "No, the debt we've been paying off for the past couple of years." Apparently, they couldn't afford to go on the holiday they went on for a few years ago in the first place, which is why they had to take on a debt from us and had assumed that they could just purchase cheap meat from stores and turn it into delicious food in order to pay it off. She said that there was no way they could have paid it off all at once when they came back, so they assumed food would be a satisfying replacement for us. I was furious because number one, we never asked them to pay it off all at once. They would have paid us back at their own pace. Hell, if they paid us £2 a day, by now they would have paid off the debt they owe us. And 2, they didn't even confirm whether we were okay with this or not. I basically told her to go F herself, gave her the plate, told her if she didn't pay us back the money owed to us within 2 weeks, she'll be receiving a call from our lawyers, and slammed the door on her face. However, my wife calmed me down and told me a civilized conversation would have been much more effective, and she also told us that we were in no need of the £400 they owed us, so we should just let it go as a gift. We are financially well off if that matters. Furthermore, the food they gave us over the years was worth well over the debt they owed us, which is another factor that made me rethink this whole situation. Am I the a-hole for not accepting this method of them paying debt? Thank you. Edit. People are saying this is relevant in the comments, so I will add it up. When we returned back the plate, we also filled the plate up with food, as in our culture it's considered rude for us to return an empty plate. Everyone sucks here, OP. Your neighbors were completely wrong for assuming that giving you food would be adequate to pay you back without ever discussing such an arrangement with you. Not cool. But you completely overreacted, threatening to bring lawyers into this and demanding the money back in 2 weeks when you don't need it and you know they can't afford it, telling her to go F herself. You should go over and apologize for the way you reacted and say to them what you've told us. Seriously, this seems like a silly thing to lose a friendship over. Talk to your wife and find out how she would like to handle it. She seems more calm-headed. Now for some comments. For the judgment, I would say a soft everyone sucks here because of how you dealt with the situation, but it was justified. They were completely out of line to decide how to pay you back without speaking to you first about it, and I understand why you reacted the way you did. I hope you can somehow salvage the situation if you want to keep a good relationship with them. Everyone sucks here. It's not fair of them to assume they can pay off the debt with food. However, it's not a huge sum of money really. and it's been a decent amount of time since the lending date. You haven't ever brought it up or communicated a payment plan. Throwing them out and threatening legal action on someone you consider a friend might have been a bit much. Is $400 worth more than the value of your friendship? Without apologizing for overreacting and communicating expectations of repayment, you're a bit to blame as well. I'm going with not the a-hole on this because you can't just decide how to pay someone back without discussing it with the person you borrowed money from. However, if you consider these people to be close friends, then I feel like you could have explained to them more calmly that their method of paying you back wasn't acceptable and that you all could sit down and discuss terms of payment going forward. Slamming doors and threatening legal action right off the bat may be overreacting. Maybe they were embarrassed about not being able to pay you back all at once. I really don't know, but you're still not the a-hole. Story 3. My husband and I started saving for my daughter's 28 females college fund since she was born. We both worked really hard for our money and we accumulated a lot for her. She ended up getting a scholarship to cover a lot of her college, so we had about $20,000 left over. We offered to give it to her at the time, and she said she would rather we keep it for when she gets married, and we agreed. That was years ago now. About 4 years ago, my daughter came out as bisexual and started dating a girl. This shocked us a lot because we never saw her as the type. My husband and I were really upset because we loved the idea of her having a husband and a family. Grandchildren for us. We thought it was just a phase, but 4 years later, they are still together and they got engaged last month. They came over to visit and do some wedding planning. She got her journal and it had the finances they put aside for the wedding as well as $20,000 mom and dad. I saw this and told her that we were planning on using that $20,000 for renovations now. She questioned us and we were upfront and said we agreed for her to use that money under the assumption she was marrying a man. Her girlfriend got very upset and started calling us homophobic, and my daughter just sat there letting her go off at us. Then my daughter said that money was mine and I had it all planned out to use it towards the wedding. Well, no, it's our money that we saved with a specific use. She left in a huff and told us to never speak to her again. I think she's being very ungrateful, but my other daughter has now turned on us as well and said we are terrible parents. I'm not homophobic. I respect same-sex couples. It is just not what I wanted for my daughter. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Wow, I wasn't expecting this reaction. Thank you for the lovely messages threatening me and calling me a homophobe. I have rethought my stance and I will be trying to be more understanding of my daughter. However, I know to never go to this forum again. Now for some comments. You're the a-hole. You were willing to just straight up hand over the money to her and she asked you to save it for her wedding. Then she found someone to marry and now you are refusing to hand over the money because that person happens to be a woman. You're being unsupportive and homophobic. And it's not even about the money, it's about how you refusing to give the money clearly shows that you don't consider her relationship valid or good enough. It shows that you think less of her because of her sexuality, and that's horrible. You're the a-hole, and you're homophobic. You have no problems with same-sex couples so as long as you're not related to them. You agreed to keep it for her wedding. Did you say at the time only if you marry someone of the opposite gender? No. Your daughter had a reasonable expectation. You had agreed to keep the $20,000 for her wedding. Normally I would be saying not the a-hole when kids expect money from parents. But in this case where you'd agreed to it, hadn't ever told the daughter something different, and are a bigoted a-hole, you and your husband are the a-holes. You're the a-hole. Please don't try to downplay homophobia. You had a preferred sexuality for your daughter in mind and are not willing to accept her rightfully own decisions. You concluded together that the money you saved up was for your daughter's wedding. The money may have originated from you, but she has equal say in where it can be used. Let me ask you this. Are you willing to alienate your daughter from your lives just to spend the extra cash on a new couch?